Good afternoon and welcome to episode 26 of the Life and Spirit podcast. And when we were last together, we were covering chapter 13 of the book of Matthew. We're finishing up, I should say, chapter 13 of the book of Matthew. And it was all about parables. In fact, chapter 13 was a very dramatic shift in the way that Jesus is teaching, and the shift was that he began teaching in parables, and we explained why there was that change in the way that he was teaching. And that chapter ended with the very sad occurrence of the town of Nazareth kind of rejecting his divinity. And they were just so familiar with him as a young man that grew up in their town that they didn't accept the fact that he was the Messiah. And so I think that's what really kind of stood in most of their way. I'm sure there were exceptions. And so today we're going to be covering chapter 14 of the book of Matthew. And if I could kind of outline what we're going to be covering. We're going to be initially covering the death of John the Baptist, and that'll be the first quarter of what we'll be discussing, and then it shifts from there to Jesus feeding 5,000, a real miracle that occurred there, and we'll be talking about that. And speaking of miracles, we'll also be discussing Jesus walking on water. And so that'll be another topic that we're going to be discussing. And then lastly, we're going to cover Jesus healing the sick in Gennesaret. And that is how we're going to be concluding chapter 14 of the book of Matthew. And so I'm going to dive in here and begin reading from my ESV Bible. And the title of the first section is The Death of John the Baptist. And I'm going to read the first 12 verses of chapter 14. By the way, we're going to be covering all of chapter 14 today, so we're going to be covering a lot of ground. And so it reads, At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, 'It is not lawful for you to have her.' And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people, because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with the oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, 'Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter.' And the king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl. And the girl's name, I believe, was Salome. And she brought it to her mother, and his disciples came and took the body and buried it, and they went and told Jesus." So that was verse 1 through 12. And, just to give you a little bit of background, Herod was the son of Herod the Great. And so Herod the Great, if you recall in earlier Bible study lesson that we had very early on, I think it was possibly lesson number 2, is that, or maybe it might have been lesson number 3, but Herod the Great, Herod the Tetrarch's father, he actually had heard from the wise men that the king of the Jews was going to be born. He was feeling threatened, and it was actually his father who actually ordered, after Joseph and Mary, they escaped to Egypt. It was his father who actually had all the children under 2 executed, and just a terrible situation that occurred as a result of his feeling threatened that his throne was being threatened by the king of the Jews that the wise men told him about. And so that just gives you an idea of his lineage. And so this is Herod the Tetrarch, and he is the son of Herod the Great. Now Herod the Tetrarch, actually, as this reading indicated, he actually it was his birthday party, was given a huge banquet. His Herodias's daughter was dancing for them. He was pleased with the dancing, and so he actually told her that he would give her anything that she asked. And I believe that she and Herodias had this kind of planned out, and she asked for the head of John the Baptist to be brought on a platter. Just a real tragic end to a great prophet's life. John the Baptist, who Jesus had earlier said was the greatest man ever born to a woman, from his birth to the beginning of time. So Jesus spoke very highly, of course, about John the Baptist. John the Baptist's disciples actually they retrieved his body. That was something that his disciples did. I'm sure that took a lot of courage for them to retrieve his body, and they buried it. One of the questions that came to my mind is I wondered if they also were able to retrieve his head, and there's no in the scripture we really don't know if they were able to retrieve his head. In fact, we probably have to surmise that they were only able to retrieve his body, and they buried that body. Speaking of bodies, it just shows you also from this reading that I just did, certainly the danger of speaking truth to power, especially if that power happens to be named Herod. That is, and again, I don't mean to make light of it, but that is particularly dangerous. And in this case, his name was Herod, and he had the power to not kill John the Baptist, and he had the power to have him killed, and he ordered that he be killed and be beheaded. It was done in prison, so he kind of distanced himself in that respect. But still, just a real tragedy that occurred, and it's an echo. And one of the questions I had asked myself is, I wondered if any of the prophets that ever prophesied about, if there may be a prophecy that relates to the death of John the Baptist, the execution of John the Baptist. And the answer really is no. There's not really a prophecy about John the Baptist being killed, but you could actually say that that there is there is an echo, if you will, or a shadow, I'm sorry. There's kind of a shadow. It's not really an echo. It's a shadow of the death of, of Elijah and Ahab and Jezebel. Certainly Elijah was frightened of Jezebel, who really had the desire to do him, great harm. She didn't actually kill Elijah, but the fact that there's some similarity between the king of Israel, Ahab, his wife, Jezebel, and the fact that Jezebel had a desire to kill Elijah, didn't get to carry that out. So there's a shadow, you might say, between that story and this story, where Herodias, the wife of the king, and Herod actually maybe conspired, and we think that she did conspire with her daughter Salome to have John the Baptist executed. Just a real tragedy that occurred, so to be sure. And so it also, if we look at Herod, and one of the things that comes to mind is when you find yourself in a position of great power, you really should be careful when making oaths. He made an oath, and it would have been within his power to not fulfill that oath that he had just made to Salome, and to tell her that he could have refused to have John the Baptist executed, but he did not. And that harkens, in a sense, to other stories in the Old Testament where people, leaders, had power and they maybe made oaths that were unwise. It brings to my mind the story of Jephthah, and who was one of the judges, I believe, and he made an unwise oath about the next person to come out of the house, and then it turned out to be his daughter, and so his unwise oath cost him his daughter's life, and we have a case here with Herod where his unwise oath cost the life of John the Baptist. Just again a real tragedy. And then you got Herodias, who is Herod's wife, who had been married to her brother, and or to his brother. To his brother, and she is so Jezebel-like in her actions. And that is something that came to my mind as I was reading this scripture, and then of course the fact that his John the Baptist disciples, who in an earlier Bible study we talked about the fact that John the Baptist had sent his disciples to ask Jesus a question. In this particular case, those same disciples retrieved his body. And then afterward, right after burying his body, they went directly to Jesus, and that's where we pick up the story. It's actually the title of this section is Jesus feeds the 5,000. I believe it's verses 13 to 22, I believe. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read that. And then we can discuss it afterwards. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. send the crowds away to go to the villages and buy food for themselves. But Jesus said, they need not go away. You give them something to eat. They said to him, we have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish. And there were a lot of people. The crowd was 5,000 men, not to mention women and children. So some think between 15 and 20,000. And so it wouldn't have been unheard of for the disciples to think, well, the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they're not going to be sufficient. But they said to him, we have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish. And he said, bring them here to me. Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces left over, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. And so, again, biblical scholars think there may have been as many as 15 to 20,000 people, and Jesus fed them with a total of the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish. But first of all, Jesus actually, out of love, when the crowd actually gathered, when he was going to find a private place to mourn his cousin John the Baptist, but then he suddenly was confronted with those huge crowds, and so out of love, he actually healed all of their sicknesses and their illnesses and diseases. And so that was something that he did out of love. And I can only imagine that they got healed that day by Jesus, who out of love, even though he was actually looking for a place to have a little seclusion to maybe mourn the death of John the Baptist. When he saw the people, he just out of love, he acted out of love and healed all the people. And as far as the feeding of 5,000, it actually brings to mind a story about Elisha, not to be confused with Elijah, but Elisha, I believe it was. And in the case of Elisha, he had 100 people, and they had very little food. And then Elisha told his servants to feed the people, and he told them, he said, they shall eat and have some left. And so that was an example of feeding with what was provided, and Elisha did that. Elisha the prophet did that for 100 people, and of course you've got the story in the wilderness where Moses. Where God used Moses to feed the people with manna, and there again, with manna, because it sprouted from the dew on the ground, and there'd always be enough. If you were a real big eater and you gathered manna, you'd always have enough to be full, because depending on the appetites of the people in the wilderness, they were able to fill their bellies with manna, and so and then they were not to store what was left, they would be provided the next day with manna. In this particular case, Jesus had fed 5,000 plus women and children, possibly 15 to 20,000. And interestingly enough, the disciples, besides witnessing this miracle, which was a definite miracle, they also participated in the miracle. They were the ones who actually handed the food to the people. And so that is, certainly something to bring up in this story. And then also, I always thought, in fact, actually, because in preparation for this Life and Spirit podcast, looking at the scripture at a deeper level, I always thought that the disciples gathered up 12 baskets. I thought they were maybe like waste baskets of of what was, the bones of the food, but actually, or of the fish, I'm sorry, of the fish in this particular case. And but no, actually, the baskets were actually fresh food that the disciples were able to eat. The number 12 is significant because there are 12 tribes of Israel, so it's significant from that standpoint. It's also very significant for the fact that there are 12 disciples. So they didn't have lunch pails or lunch baskets or boxes, but what they did have is they had these baskets of food, and so they were able to eat as well. And I have to also give the disciples credit because they acted in faith when Jesus told them to feed the people. They must have thought, well, I guess we'll see what happens here, and they actually did their part, and everybody wound up eating. It is interesting how in the case of Elisha, in the case of Jesus, and even in, well, I might be stretching it here a little bit in the case of Moses, because of the dew, and that's the manna kind of grew where the dew came to the ground. But it is interesting in the case of Elisha and Jesus where the human provision is actually used, and then he is able. It's enough to meet the need when that human provision is actually being handled by the Messiah, the Son of God. It is enough, and when I say it's enough. It's interesting that he took the food, he blessed the food. Jesus here, he took the food, he blessed the food, he broke the food, gave it to the disciples to give to the people. So those 4 steps, if you will, and that actually does kind of hearken to the fact that a very similar kind of thing occurred in the Last Supper. And so that is something that I wanted to talk about, and then the process of multiplication, and again taking that what really is little food, the 5 loaves of peasant bread, the bread loaves were not big loaves, but peasant loaves of bread. And the fish that may have been small themselves, but somehow he was able to take this very little, and through the process of multiplication, of course, the will of the Father and the fact that he blessed the food, that he was able to satisfy all of the hungers of the crowds, and for that matter, the disciples as well. And they ate simply. I mean, they ate a meal. I'm sure it was, somehow I believe it must have been delicious. But as manna was, they say manna, tasted so good. And but when you compare it to like the opulent banquet that Herod had on his birthday, that particular meal was quite simple because it consisted of just the fish, the serving of fish and bread, and so simple, but it certainly satisfied the hungers of the people that came to hear Jesus' ministry, to be healed. And so that is how we kind of leave it there with that particular part of the story. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the next section of this story, which is Jesus walks on the water. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way away from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, and he walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." And so there's a lot to unpack in that story. And one thing to unpack is the fact that, well, first of all, that Jesus actually went up on the mountain to pray. He wanted to be alone. He actually, in his possibly exhausted kind of state, he was strengthened by prayer to the Father, and so there's that aspect of his personal prayer life with the Father that is definitely a rejuvenating kind of a spiritual habit of Jesus that he was exercising on the mountain. There was that. And then there also, in this particular case, there are echoes of the book of Job and the book of Psalms. And I don't recall exactly how those verses go, but both in the book of Job as well as the book of Psalms, it refers to actually the Lord, I believe, kind of walking on the sea and then traveling through the sea. And so there's references. They're not direct references. He wasn't fulfilling a direct prophecy in this particular case, but you could certainly say that there are echoes in the book of Job and the book of Psalms that refer to walking on water or traveling through the sea. And so that is something that is definitely something I wanted to talk about. Again, that spiritual replenishment. It wasn't that he was just doing his spiritual duty and going up and praying to the Father, but he was actually being spiritually replenished in his solitude in his prayer to the Father. And so then he saw the disciples. They were fighting like crazy against the waves and the sea and the wind. And they were, probably really rowing like crazy to try to, fight through the storm, the wind. And then he was walking to them. And it's definitely interesting that he actually says, when they asked, when they asked him who he was, he said, "I am," and so kind of similar to the where Moses was told by the fiery bush that that I am, when he asked who he said, "I am." So there's some similarity there. By that similarity, you could say that he certainly was. The fact that he was walking on water, I think, also is an indication to the disciples that that he is divine. They marveled at his ability to calm the storms and everything, and they thought, who is it that has authority even over weather? And so in this particular case, they saw him walking on water, and so he identifies himself. I think that Peter deserves some credit. He actually, the fact that he got out of the boat and he walked to Jesus when after Jesus said, "Come," and so he waited until Jesus said, "Come," and then he did walk on the water to Jesus. Probably fixed on Jesus as he was, his gaze was probably fixed on Jesus as he was walking. Then he maybe looked around, and then the wind and the storm was a distraction. He began to sink, and then Jesus reached down and he was able to save Peter from drowning, but I think he deserves some real credit for actually having the kind of faith that would allow him to walk to Jesus in the first place. And then I also was thinking about that, and I was thinking that because this is pre-resurrection, and so he's not, doesn't have the full Holy Spirit at that point. So it's definitely a real act of faith on his part to walk to Jesus. So I think he deserves some props for that. And then of course all the disciples marveled at Jesus when he got into the boat. And the second he got into the boat, guess what happened? All of the storms and the wind calmed down, and they said, "This is the Son of God," and they worshipped him. It doesn't say in the book of Matthew what that worship entailed, but the fact that they had his identity right, that he is the Son of God, and that they worshipped him. So they not only did they think the right thing, but they acted correctly. And so that is a powerful way that kind of ends this particular section of chapter 14. And so the next section, and I'm going to begin reading the next section. It's entitled, "Jesus Heals the Sick in Gennesaret." Gennesaret. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And so it starts with verse 34. "And when they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of the place recognized him, they sent around for all the region and brought to him all who were sick, and implored him that they might only touch his fringe of his garments, and as many as touched it were made well." And so here again, we have a case where large crowds gathered to be healed by Jesus. Jesus, out of love, out of compassion, certainly did that healing. And it is, I actually thought, and it was kind of fresh on my mind because it's another story in the book of Matthew, so I think it comes kind of fresh in my mind. But the woman that had the illness that was the flow of blood, the woman with the flow of blood, I believe she had that illness for like 12 years, and she had the faith to know that just by touching the fringe of his garment, that she would be made well, and she was made well, and that healing power came out of Jesus, and Jesus, out of love for that woman, even referred to her as daughter. And so this, kind of brings that story to my mind, the fact that the people of Gennesaret, they came to be healed. It didn't require, and I guess it didn't require any really elaborate, polished, kind of presentation by either Jesus or the people being healed, but it was just by simply touching the fringe of his garment, they were healed, and Jesus allowed that healing power to come out of him, and all that touched him were healed that day. And so that is certainly something that is a miracle. It is showing his divine power again. I'm sure the disciples really marveled at all the people that were healed by just touching the fringe of his garment. And so that is the way that chapter 14 kind of comes to a close. We're now going to be going into chapter 15. And so we were able to cover all of chapter 14 in one lesson and one Bible study podcast. And so I'm very thankful for that we were able to cover this much ground. I hope you found that the ground that we covered was something that you found to be helpful in your study of chapter 14 of the book of Matthew. Hopefully it might elicit some spiritual insights on your part. I would welcome any comments, if you want to share any thoughts or insights with me, any questions that you might have. Certainly, if you would like to subscribe to that podcast, you'd be so welcomed into this Bible study community. And so that was actually episode 26 of the Life and Spirit podcast. I'm so glad you could be with me today. And I want to say in closing, God bless you. God bless your families. I wish you the very, very best until we meet again, which will be doing a study on chapter 15 of the book of Matthew. But until then, have a wonderful, blessed day.